number 1, calm. Number 2, time. Number 3, space. Number 4, communication. And number 5, distraction. So they are the 5 key strategies to put in place before the meltdown. So this is to de-escalate, and that is the key thing we want to do. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to look at de-escalation strategies before, during and after a meltdown or shutdown. This is so important that we actually have thought about this before the meltdown, that we have in place lots of strategies to try. Because remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. But what I mean by everybody, what works for the teacher assistant mightn't work for the teacher, or what works for the principal mightn't work for the parent. So we have to have a whole range of strategies. But I want to give you some clues and ideas what to do. I've also created a one-page PDF that I'd love you to print out and put on your staff room fridge or whiteboard, or even behind the toilet, and families to put up at home, of just quick de-escalation strategies to remind you what to do, because so often it's about us staying calm in the moment. And part of staying calm, I think, is having things on hand or in your mind and really thought about it. So here's the thing. I just want to remind you that a meltdown is not a tantrum. It's where someone becomes completely overwhelmed by their current situation and actually have lost control. And we must, in my way of looking at it, it's like a seizure, but I'll come to that later. It's really often caused by social, it's caused by anxiety, it's caused by confusion. And for so many of my students, we need to put in place proactive and reactive strategies. So for me, the before stuff is all the stuff that I talk about in my face-to-face or my online course. So those of you who have done my face-to-face or my live virtual, in the handout, you get the 50-50 behaviour plan, which is the 50% the student has to do and 50% you have to do. And by that, I mean routines, visuals, timers, having a quiet area, allowing time to process, social scripts, yes? All those things. They're the proactive strategies. And I always love to say, never in the history of calming down has anyone calmed down. So we have to be aware that it's the actual environment and the routines and the structures that help the student calm. The more of those things we can do, the better. Because remember, anxiety up, problem solving down. And we want to get the anxiety down. That has to be your number one thing. How do you get the anxiety down? And that is through all your proactive strategies. So if you have my book, The Ultimate Guide to School and Home, it lays out how to use timers, how to set up schedules, how to set up routines. And there's so many practical strategies in there. But today is really about what to do during the meltdown to de-escalate it, what I call phase 1 and 2. So those of you, again, who have done my online course or my face-to-face course know that phase 1 is actually where the student's building up. And we have to get good at noticing things that can cause the student to go into the build-up. And in the Ultimate Guide to School and Home, on page 88, those of you that have it, there's like a whole page. I think there's like 50 things. This can be everything from a sudden change in schedule, not having their sensory tools, to misunderstanding a metaphor, to being rushed. There's so many things, but I'd highly recommend you start to make a list of things that can make a child escalate. But also notice the signs. And at my workshops, we talk about, the change of body posture, change of look in their eyes, change of complexion, change of the way they're moving. But to de-escalate, you need to be aware of those things. You need to be able to look at the student and go, oh, I need to put in place some strategies, because we can only put in place strategies during phase 1 and 2. So that's during build up and survival. So you need to be able to go, okay, I can see things are escalating. What can I do to de-escalate? So this podcast is all about what do you do to de-escalate. So the first thing I think you have to do is what I call number one is calm. You need to act calm even if you're not. Do a little what I call body scan. Just check just over your whole body, just run your hands down yourself and go, am I calm? Is my posture calm? Is my voice calm? Am I calm? Because these kids pick up on your anxiety. So you need to all children pick up on adults' anxiety or change of tone of voice. So you need to be highly aware of your own calm, yes? Then calm the environment. Often getting the rest of the class settled will help this student settle, making sure that there's not lots of movement and noise, or giving the student a space they can move to. Actually decreasing the sensory stimulation. So often that is going to escalate things. And use your calm, reassuring voice. Those of you who've done my workshops, I call this I am a GPS. So if you think of the GPS, that calm, monotone voice. Now, for those of you who have students with PDA or ODD, remember they need to be in control to feel calm. So allow them to have some control. So I call it choose your battles. And, if really ask yourself, does it matter if they're doing that right now? Because so often letting them have control of the situation will help them calm. So this is where sometimes we start reacting, but you need to get good in your head going, choose my battles. Doesn't matter they're doing that right now. Because whether it's home or school, you getting angry or escalating it for an ODD and PDA kid is going to send it into a meltdown really fast. So calm has to be number one. And I'm not saying this is easy. I'm just asking you to think about what can I do to ensure that I'm calm and the environment's calm. The next one is time. And what I mean by that is give them processing time. Don't hurry them up. For many of my kids, anxiety up, processing down. So they're going to need longer to process. So therefore, you need to slow it down and break it down. Only give them small achievable steps. Don't give them a massive task to do. Make sure that you're only saying circle the top half of something or a small thing they need to do. Not, tidy up your desk, push your chair in, go and get your bag, get that excursion note. That's too many things. Parents, it's not find your shoes, find your school bag, where's that thing, too many things. So slow it down, break it down, allow time to process. The next one is space. And what I mean by that is ignore, ignore, ignore. Wherever possible, just ignore them. If they're under the table, just ignore them. If they're standing at the back of the room, just ignore them. If they're standing away from the line, just ignore them, because normally that's survival mode. They're actually trying to give themselves some space to help themselves calm down. So they're actually trying to de-escalate themselves. So you need to actually ignore wherever possible and let them have that space. If they want to move their desk away from everyone else, they are actually trying to de-escalate. So ignore. But my rule is ignore for 5 minutes and then just check in where they're at. Because sometimes after that 5 minutes, I can see by looking at their face and their body that they're ready to come out from under the table, and I might need to help them by giving them a job or a distraction. They might know how to transition back from under the table or the back of the room. Now, when I do talk to them, it's really important to know their personal space, like all of us. If you're anxious, and some of you wouldn't like people close to you, other people like people close to you. Some people like touch and a hug when they're anxious, some don't. So you need to know what works for this student. But in my experience is I wouldn't get in their face. I would probably stay a couple of meters away, get down to their level. All these things, they're just reminders, but there's nothing wrong with a reminder. I would love you while I'm talking to think of the last meltdown that you saw and think, which of these things did you do? Because guess what? Sometimes even if you do this stuff, you're going to get a shutdown or a meltdown. But I just want you to think, oh yeah, no, I did do that. Did I keep the environment calm? Was my voice calm? Did I give them space? And the next and important one is communication. I like to just be silent wherever possible. Ask yourself, is it important I say that now? Like really, does it really matter? Because remember, their processing is going to be really slow. Are they really going to hear you? Is this the morning to tell them to find their shoes, or am I going to find their shoes? Is this the morning to get them to come up with a sentence starter? Well, I get them started, because sometimes getting them started will actually de-escalate the meltdown. That being said, some of my students actually need reassurance. I found over the years, particularly my girls on the spectrum, they just need to know what we're doing when in my calm, we're doing this and when we're doing that. Just a bit of reassurance, they're okay, I'm here if they need me, if they need to talk, did they want to go outside with a friend? I have to think, what reassures this student? For some of my students, their sensory tool will reassure them. What will reassure them? And for some of my kids, I think you can answer their questions, but don't coach or correct, particularly your oppositional kids. If they start swearing, don't coach or correct, just answer their questions, validate their feelings. I can see you're frustrated. Let me know if you need any help. That's all. You don't need to say you didn't need to swear or you can't say that. And remember, saying you can't say that when they just said that will often escalate the behavior because they did and you said they couldn't. Anyway, that's a little bit confusing over a podcast, but hopefully you know what I'm saying. So stay calm, clear, and concise. And I must say, I've got myself in de-escalation mode, and I can feel myself in my very calm voice today. I've been thinking about this podcast for the last 24 hours, and I think I've got into my very monotone because I'm talking about de-escalation. So I probably should get my normal voice back on. I hope I'm not sending people to sleep. So anyway, let them know you're here if you need them. Now, for some of my students, that's just walking past, giving them the thumbs up. I don't have to talk. You don't have to talk to let a student know you're there if they need you. Or some of my students in the past, I've had a little card that says that I actually write down, I need help, and they can bring that to me when they need help, or I need the toilet, and I'll put those cards near them, or I need to go for a walk, and they just bring that over to me. Or I have a little system where they give me a little sign or thing to say they want to go for a walk. And we just communicate like that. It's so important to remember that your communication can escalate this situation. So to de-escalate, you need to think about your communication. And by that, I mean avoid the word no. The word no can send a kid into a meltdown or a shutdown in a heartbeat. Because they hear never. When you say no, they hear never again for the rest of their life. So this is when we need the now, next, later. So it's not no iPad. It's when you've finished your work, then you can go on the iPad. Or when we've finished this, then you can do that. Not, no, you can't have it. Because guaranteed when you say no, your voice is going to become no, not calm. And it doesn't tell the child what to do. So tell them what they need to do and when they can have it. I know you've all heard me say this lots of times, but I don't know why you use the word no. It doesn't tell a child what to do. Even running on the road. I think you've heard me say this on the podcast many times. It's not don't run on the road, no running on the road. It's hold my hand. It's telling the child what to do. It's so important. Don't say no throwing pencils. Put the pencil in the pencil case. What is the action you want? Saying no doesn't tell a child what to do. The other one, I think, which we can't help ourselves, but we start reasoning. Don't reason, don't bargain, just calm, clear, concise instructions. And wherever you can, just ignore inappropriate language, inappropriate behaviour. Remember, they are just trying to communicate. They're overwhelmed. They are often trying to calm themselves. They're actually trying to self-regulate. So for many of my kids, if you start getting in their face or start telling them not to do things, or it will just escalate. So ignore and silence are key. Think about your communication. And number 5 is distraction. And that is probably the most important thing you need to think about. What can distract this student when they are escalating? So I'm just going to turn to page 92 of the Ultimate Guide, where we have a whole lot of things you can do. And lots of you have my tip sheet, The Power of Preventative Breaks. There's about 50 different things you can do. But what we mean by distraction is a break, is a preventative break. So it could be sensory. It could be listening to music, letting them hum or sit under a table with a blanket over it. It could be a physical break. And remember, movement has been found to be as good as anxiety medication. So we want to de-escalate. This student might need some movement. It might be doing star jumps, wall push-ups, going for a run, going on the equipment, throwing bean bags, actually, letting them go and rock on a chair. I don't know, on one of those wobble chairs. A relaxation break. So some of my students counting, if they've actually done any cognitive behavior therapy and taught breathing exercises or know how to do that. Telling a student to breathe, I don't think is a strategy unless they've learned that breathing. I love, you might have seen that bubble breathing where you put just a number 8 side on, where you run your finger over that and breathe in and out because it's more visual and the kids like that. But blowing bubbles is a great one for a breathing exercise, or one of those little, remember those Ferris the wheels you used to get at the show that had those little like star wheels? You can still make them with the split pin, and blowing that actually can help some students calm, but others will huff and puff and hyperventilate. So physical breaks, relaxation breaks. Now, for some of our girls, letting them escape into that imaginary world, or for some of my boys, letting them talk about Minecraft can actually be really relaxing, or building Lego. I tend to avoid technology. I tend to find, in a school, this is invariably where the internet will go down, it'll slow down. But I do find technology tends to put them in a holding pattern, not a de-escalation pattern. So remember, I want to de-escalate, not just keep it at a holding pattern. Don't get me wrong, parents, you might use technology when you're out just to get them in that holding pattern until you get them home to be able to jump on a trampoline and de-escalate. But the aim of this is de-escalation. Absolutely my favorite thing for most of my students to give them a job, send them on an errand, what I call non-threatening withdrawal or diversion. So giving them a job to do, helping them give out books, helping them, not kids who shut down, they'll want more space. But for my kids who need movement, often giving them a job will get them moving with purpose. They need a purpose, just saying calm down or go and do this, that's probably not going to work. And some of my kids, particularly my kids who have shut down, they need their solitude. They need their tent. They need to be able to have a desk they can sit on their own, or special interest time. But say their special interest is Star Wars, I might just have some Star Wars Lego. Or if it's Minecraft, I might have a Minecraft colouring in, or dot to dot, or find the word. I'll do something like that. Read a book, any of these things. So anything for solitude. If you're lucky enough to have a little room, send them there. And remember, the other key strategies are toilet, drink, and food. So often these kids, because of interoception, don't know they're hungry, thirsty, or tired, or need the toilet. And any of you who are hungry, thirsty, or need the toilet know it impacts on your behaviour. So we might de-escalate with that. I personally like to rule that out up front: toilet, drink, food. And some of my kids actually do like to talk to a mentor or a peer or a friend or their teacher assistant, or some of my kids have someone in the office they love, or a leadership team. And talking to them is absolutely a great de-escalation strategy. So if you've got the Ultimate Guide to School and Home, I highly recommend you have a little refresh, go back and read pages 87 to 93, or actually that's got about suspension and expulsion. Some of you might want to read about that. 94. It is probably, Anna, my key stuff in that book. And look, there's over 500 strategies in the Ultimate Guide, and any of you who have it, this is a great reminder to go and get it off your shelf. It's the white book with the key on it if you've forgotten which one I'm talking about. But I hope that you have got some ideas there. So number one is I've just turned over the page. Number one, calm. Number two, time. Number 3, space. Number 4, communication. And number 5, distraction. So they are the 5 key strategies to put in place before the meltdown. So this is to de-escalate, and that is the key thing we want to do. Now, during phase 3, nothing works. You must treat it like a seizure. In a seizure, what we do is we check for danger and remove bystanders. We know people on the spectrum tell us that they lose the ability to process or make sense of any incoming information. It's like their whole body has stopped in a shutdown or a meltdown. And I have worked with enough kids to know they definitely lose cognitive function. And I'll come to that in a minute, how you know if they're a student that loses cognitive function, and that's the after. But very important to remove bystanders. Now, if possible, I like to have an escape route open, having a door open, or knowing that there's a little room they can go to, knowing that there's a safe place. But I understand some of your schools are not safe beyond that door, and you've got kids who are runners. But if possible, having an escape route. Now, one of my boys, he knew if he needed to leave, he was allowed to run over. He liked this little bit of our garden. I had another boy who was allowed to run to the office. I had another boy who was allowed to run to the learning support office. So we said, if you need to calm, and we told him where to go. And we had a social script and we practiced that. If you need to leave the room. Interestingly, I think most of those kids probably only ever did that once or twice a term. And they were big triggers. They were big triggers, like a relief teacher in the room who yelled. One of my other boys, it was a bullying and teasing incident, and he just, I'd prefer he ran there than hit someone, which is what he used to do. Another one of my girls used to go to the garden. Now I'm trying to remember. That was a complete. She was completely overwhelmed, and she started crying, and she didn't want people to see her. And so we then set up she could go to the garden to do that. And she probably used that initially quite a lot, like once a week. And then we did some more work on her emotional regulation and getting upset, and working on her social skills, which was, understanding the other girls, because sometimes she became very possessive of friends, and she really was worried they weren't her friends anymore and became overwhelmed with emotions. But her going to the garden was better than her hurting someone, swearing, crying in front of people, because then she'd have this whole not wanting to go to school. So have a think if you can create somewhere safe for them to go. Or in your own home, where can they go? Where can they go? Into the garden? Because some houses aren't safe either. Children will climb the fences. But just a reminder to call for support where you can, and have that pre-worked out. Are you going to text? Are you going to send students? Well, how are you going to call for help? And it's very important to get a colleague to take your class sometimes. Who's your backup? Who can take your class so you can go and sit with the student or talk to the student? So often the last thing the student needs is another staff member coming and talking to them during the shutdown or meltdown. They need you, who they have a good relationship with. So often that backup is really important. But remember, stay calm and walk away, because it's like a seizure. If a student's having a seizure, you would not talk to them. You would not get involved. So what do you do after? So a reminder though, a meltdown can go for an hour or 2. Yes, parents listening, you've seen these. They can go for a long time. They're not just over in 5 minutes like a tantrum. And what makes it hard is after, very often the student doesn't remember anything. I've had it where people ask the student, what do you think happened? And they'll say, nothing, I don't remember, or talk about something completely different, or what they were doing earlier that day. But doesn't that show it is like a seizure? If you ask them what happened and they're talking about, I did this writing, and they have no recollection of the massive meltdown, that tells you they did lose cognitive function in that shutdown or meltdown. Okay, so after the meltdown, I think it's very important that you notify parents and carers ASAP, because most parents know when they see and carers, when they see their kid, they know something's happened that day. So it's important they know about it. I'm a bit of a avoider getting parents to come and pick them up or get involved unless, it's really important that happens. But for many of my kids, they just want to get on with the day, actually. They don't remember it. We're just going to get on with the day. And remember, often they can't communicate directly after the meltdown and haven't had time to process it anyway. Even if they do remember, they haven't had time to process. So you're just better off getting on with the routine. But often when they go home, they do want to process it. And I've had a lot of kids who it's at bedtime. When the house is quiet, they'll come and wake their parents up and tell them something happened in the day. So it's very important that the parents and carers are notified. And parents and carers, if your child's had a meltdown, let the school know too, because often the reverse can happen. I think I would wait at least a day after meltdown, because I don't know about you, but it is stressful for you. And often if you start talking about it, you can not stay calm because it might have been distressing to watch, and it can be very distressing to watch. And so I always think wait till everyone's emotions have come back down. Ask the parents and carers if the student spoke to them overnight about it, if they've got any clues what happened, if you don't know what happened, because sometimes we don't. But personally, I'm a big fan of move on. Don't dwell with the student or yourself. I have seen where this can reactivate the meltdown or shutdown and actually impact on your relationship with the student. They have autism spectrum disorder. Meltdowns and shutdowns are part of it. They have oppositional defiant disorder or PDA. Meltdowns and shutdowns are part of the disorder, even though I hate the word disorder. It's part of the condition. If a child has a seizure, we don't spend hours going back over what happened before, during, and after. So please, if you can think of it like that, it makes life so much better. I can't tell you, move on. Just, okay, what were the triggers? What can we do to de-escalate next time? What are the lessons we learn as the adults? What can we put in place? Boom, 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 done. I don't necessarily need to talk to the student about that. But if you want to talk to them about it, just a word of warning that they mightn't remember, they might not know, and you might talk in circles. However, some of the students might want to talk about it and might want to come up with a plan for next time. And that is what I like to talk to them about. What could we do different next time? Okay, there was a relief teacher who yelled. We will let them know. Oh, your friends didn't want to play with you. Okay, well, let's remember sometimes our friends want to play with us, sometimes they don't. Let's write a social script about that. Let's go and ask, are they still your friends? Yes, they are. Let's go and check, because maybe there was a problem that I've missed, So it's really important to go back to your proactive strategies, back to what I started this podcast with social scripts and pre-warning, like there's going to be a relief teacher tomorrow. Watching your tone of voice, giving those sensory breaks. So putting in place those proactive strategies, not reactive strategies. And the big one I think to remember is this, and I know many of you would have heard me on my rant on my podcast about it is so important that we are aware that these students need a different behaviour system to the rest of the class. I mean, I go into schools all the time where I see those zones of regulation, which are great for neurotypical kids, but ASD kids need to be taught about their zones. Most of my kids end up on the red, and they don't know, and we're not giving them strategies, de-escalation strategies for themselves. So I highly recommend, if you haven't seen my emotional regulation program, which is emotional literacy for children with autism spectrum, ADHD, ODD, PDA, all those kids who need to actually be taught about their emotions. They come on like a freight train. They don't see them coming. Next thing, they're having a meltdown, and they did not feel anything coming. It was 0 to 100. And the only way is to teach them about their emotions and how to regulate their own emotions. Because remember, never in the history of calming down has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down. If your partner told you to calm down, guaranteed you wouldn't. Imagine if your partner told you, go and sit at that table and calm down. I guess you wouldn't. But what if you might be a person who needs to talk it through with your partner, or you might need your partner to say, do you want a cup of tea, or do you want to go for a walk? Children on the spectrum need the tools to calm. and it's up to us to give them to them. So highly recommend, if you haven't had a look at my emotional regulation online course, it's just a 3-hour course. It's got all the things you can download, print, do with the whole class or groups or an individual student. But for me, it's really about understanding meltdowns are part of autism spectrum disorder, ODD and PDA, and it's up to us to put in place de-escalation strategies and support this student, because most of the kids I know do not like the feeling of meltdowns and shutdowns. They can be quite unsettling, just like when I've taught children with epilepsy, how unsettling a seizure could be, or a student with asthma. I mean, I've had students who have massive asthma attacks and you have to get an ambulance, and that can be very traumatic. And I think we can't underestimate the trauma really around behaviour for many of my students, because what I know is my students, I sound like I own, but I've taught over 3,000 kids on the spectrum, and all of them want to do the right thing. All of them want to be engaged. None of them want to have meltdowns and shutdowns. And that's why I'm passionate that you actually de-escalate it so they don't have to have this overwhelming, horrible feeling, which can take a long time to recover from, whether at home or school. So can you make sure you download the PDF that I've created for you that has the de-escalation strategies as just quick reminders what to do. Remember, strategies wear out. Not every strategy works for everybody. I hope you found this episode invaluable and you're excited to put in place some strategies for de-escalation. I'd also love you to think about joining me for a face-to-face or live virtual workshop this term. I've got lots coming up. Now, I know lots of you like learning different ways. You can either watch the course online on demand, live virtual, or check if I'm coming near you. The worst thing is when you hear after. So go and have a look on my website. I have upcoming workshops in Tamworth, Adelaide, Sydney, and live virtual. I am trying to make it more accessible for you. Most of my workshops are run on a Thursday or Friday because as a teacher, I like being out of the class later in the week so I can have my class set up and ready to go. I know that if you come along, if you found this episode helpful, what I know is you're going to get so many more practical tips and strategies in my face-to-face courses or live virtual. I would love you to join me. Check my website for upcoming dates. Of course, you can register online and we can send an invoice to your organisation, or parents, carers, you can pay later. Some of you can use your NDIS funding. Check with your plan manager. But I hope you can join me in whichever format works for you, however you prefer to learn. If you prefer to learn at your own pace in your own time, online on demand. If you prefer live virtual where you don't have to be there for the day but prefer to be in your pajamas and not have the stress of parking, then join me for live virtual, or if I'm not coming near you. Or I can't wait to see you at face-to-face. Now, can you do me a favour? If you come to my face-to-face, people are often embarrassed to come up and ask for a photo. But I'm also embarrassed to go, does anyone want a photo? But I love it at the end of the workshops when I can share those photos with my community, when you can go back and put a photo in your newsletter and go, hey, our teachers went to this training, or our educators, or parents, you can subtly share it with your family and friends about, hey, these are the things that I learned to support my child, and you could do as my family to support too, whatever works for you. But please, particularly at lunchtime's normally easier for me because I don't have as much admin things I need to sort. Come up to me at lunchtime, say, Sue, can I have a photo? Or when you first arrive, that's often an awesome time too. But come up and go, Sue, I listened to your podcast. Can we have a photo? But even if you see me in the street, I ran into someone at the airport and they're like, can I have a photo? And I'm like, absolutely. Honestly, it makes my day. I cannot tell you how much I love getting photos with my beautiful community. It warms my soul. And honestly, it energizes me to do more podcasts and do the things that I don't know, that just to know that I'm making a difference to you and the children. And I always have in mind my beautiful children I've known and worked with over the years, and thinking of myself as a teacher, the strategies I wished I'd had in place. So please come up to me and ask for a photo. I will be upset. I will be angry if you don't. I don't want to hear later, oh, I didn't want to ask. So please come up and ask for a photo. I will always say yes, even if I say just give me 5 minutes. I cannot wait to connect with you and know that you listened to the podcast and heard this message of come and get a photo with me. Can't wait. Take care. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.sulaki.com.au.